Hello, everyone. Welcome into Guilty as Charged podcast. Bolt breakdowns here on the channel every week. Talk about everything related to the Chargers and specifically everything related to fantasy football this week. From the biggest fantasy football podcast show in the world, I have Mike, the fantasy football hitman, Wright, joining me today. So, Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thank you for having me on. Football is rapidly approaching. It is exciting for everyone.
Yeah, exciting for everyone. If you are in the Los Angeles area, like a lot of our listeners are, the guys are doing a live show at the Palace Theater on August 26th. You can go to ballerslive.com and get some tickets. Mike, what are you going to be doing at this show?
So we have not unveiled what the show topic will be, but it's going to be spicy. It's going to be just a ton of fun. I mean, this will be a full-on rock show style, as rock show as a podcast can possibly be. But I mean, we're hoping to have 1,000 of our listeners there, and just if you've never experienced one of our live events, they are absolutely electric and outrageous, and that's with half of the amount of people that should be at the Palace Theater. So we are looking very much forward to it. My past life has entertainer and musician in it, so this is living the dream here, getting to be up on stage, performing, and giving out some good fantasy football advice along the way.
Speaking of absolutely outrageous and electric, hopefully the 2023 Chargers. So I know you've been following. Thanks. Still rookie at this, but it's okay. I guess you've been following all of the teams, in the NFL, their off seasons and what they've been doing with player transactions, their drafts, and all the kind of stuff to, refresh your fantasy football strategy before your drafts this year. What kind of stands out to you about how the Chargers season ended last year and I guess what they've done in the off season since?
Sure. Well, it was. I'll just speak from the fantasy side of things, but it was, an unfortunate and bit disappointing for Justin Herbert, coming off of those the insane rookie year, goes to new heights the next year. But to be fair to the man, I mean, the guy was playing with basically broken ribs for the majority of the season, and I don't know if the people at home have ever broken a rib. It is awful, and it takes forever to heal, and that's without 300-pound men trying to jam their helmet into said broken rib while you're trying to recover. So totally get it. But it was a bit disappointing. The yardage was there, the touchdowns they just didn't happen to show up for Herbert last year. A lot of that could be, Keenan Allen missed a vast majority of the season. Mike Williams continued his battle with health, being in and out of the lineup. However, we are at the Fantasy Footballers. We're pretty excited for what the Chargers. We expect them to bounce back in a big way, especially because they did something great. They said, OC, get your old busted football out of here. We're going into the future. We are going to modern football. And they brought in Kellen, who was the offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys for quite some time. And while Kellen, just to give you it's just a little tidbit here, Dak Prescott in 2018 threw the ball for 3,800 yards and 22 touchdowns. In comes Kellen Moore. Dak Prescott goes to 4,900 yards and 30 passing touchdowns. That is what we're talking about, especially for fantasy football. So very excited that the person who is bringing in the new offensive philosophy is a pass-first type of OC, which is, I mean, that's the strength. That's what the Chargers are. They are built to be a passing team. You have your franchise quarterback locked up, got that shmoney. You have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams back, and they said, that's not enough. Quentin Johnston, first-round wide receiver, get in here. And Austin Ekeler, perhaps you can argue, say, well, right now he's the best pass-catching running back. At the worst, he's in the top 3 right now. That's where he really excels. So the fact that they want to, with their actions, I should say, that what they've said they're going to lean into, it's very, very exciting because the production should just be flowing. Fantasy points is all over the field for the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you like this new offense that they're shifting to. The best team in red zone conversion percentage last year was those Kellen Moore's Dallas Cowboys. So thanks for giving him to us, I guess.
Yeah.
From a Chargers fan perspective, for sure. I guess let's get into Austin Ekeler because I think his whole offseason has been interesting, right? Initially demands a trade. The running back value shift thing happens. Then the running backs are all in a meeting to say that they matter. And then the fantasy football
Right.
people are arguing, some that they do matter, some that they don't, right? I guess I just wanted to get into what are kind of the expectations for him this year. Obviously had 900 rushing yards last year, 700 receiving yards, 18 and 20 touchdowns the last 2 years. Uh, I guess the question I have is his usage, right? Is it sustainable again for now? This will be his fourth straight season as starter to kind of, still maintain that production as a guy going into his 30s. They want to bring on maybe Isaiah Spiller or Joshua Kelly to kind of relieve some of those snaps. But what are kind of your expectations for him this year?
So my expectations are the usage, I think, will be pretty much just status quo, what it was last year. The difference could be in those games in the splits where like either Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, they were out. You saw that his target share rose, like not just, he got a little bump, but pretty considerably. So if those two guys are still on the field, I would expect the target share to go down a little bit. And of course, having a first round rookie wide receiver, just another capable pass catcher, we could see a downshift in the actual target share for Ekeler. Now, could the size of the passing pie with Kellen Moore coming in, could it rise from what it was last year? I mean, it was already pretty solid this past season. But usage-wise, I'm not concerned about Austin Ekeler. Now, his age, which it's always hard to talk about Ekeler. He's been on our show multiple times. Like this dude has his head on just the right place. Like he is a great football player. He knows fantasy football. He does a show about fantasy football, a weekly show in the season. Like he understands what's going on. And it's like, man, but seeing what's going on with the running back position, it is really tough. But whatever the Chargers, what they've done is, I don't know that you have a guy that can really get on the field and that you need to get on the field. I'll put it that way. A guy that you need to get on the field, where there are teams like the Cowboys last year, just easy top of head. You got Zeke. He was their guy. But Tony Pollard is a player you have to get on the field. Just you have to give him a certain amount of touches throughout the season. Where Isaiah Spiller, I think he hasn't lived up to what the expectations are. And then Joshua Kelly, he seems like he should be the next guy up. We even, a couple years ago, when Ekeler was on the show, he talked about he's not sure he's going to get goal line. Well, that rapscallion lied right to our face, and then Austin Ekeler got all the goal line. But it seemed like to him, what the coaches were saying is, we want to get Joshua Kelly in to spell you more. Then they draft Isaiah Spiller. But then they just don't – they can't. They can't get those guys on the field because Austin Ekeler is just so good. The only concerns then for Ekeler are, can he maintain his level of efficiency? Because it's just off the charts. But then again, it's been off the charts his entire career. Like, running backs don't catch touchdowns at the rate that Austin Ekeler does. It's just it is a complete outlier to see that amount of touchdowns in the receiving game. And then his ratio of rushing yards to rushing touchdowns, of what you would expect. Like, so what I mean by that is you break down, you just take the league, all the rushing yards and all the rushing touchdowns, and what do we expect like how many yards does a running back usually have per rushing touchdown? And Eckler's ratio is always just out of whack. He just continues to pour on just crazy amounts of touchdowns, which makes him a superstar for fantasy football. It feels foolish to call for that to end, considering that's who he has been as a player his entire career. This wasn't one spike year where you have to be like, well, is this really who Ekeler is? Yeah, this really is who Austin Ekeler is. We like a guy who might be a little perturbed with his team and his contract situation to go out there and really just a little bit extra. I mean, these are all the 0.01% athletes trying to find an edge. Well, when a guy's a little bit mad that he's not getting the money that he thinks that he should get, we'll take that. We will absolutely take that as a little bit of extra motivation. So Ekeler is the consensus running back 2, right behind Christian McCaffrey for, I think, the entirety of the fantasy football industry. So it's a system of like, don't overthink it, because even if the rushing kind of falls down a little bit, he's such a good pass catcher, and that's what we need. We need strong pass catching from running backs to truly become an elite player, and Ekeler has that on lockdown.
Yeah, I think the question for me is kind of, as you said, how is everything kind of going to shift, right? If you have Kellen Moore who wants to get the ball down the field, are all of those like screens that he catches, 2-3 yards away from the line of scrimmage and then does a lot of stuff after the catch, is that going to exist as much for him as it did last year under Joe Lombardi? I think that's a question if you're kind of thinking about fantasy. But I mean, obviously he's been stellar. I do think there was a legitimate effort to get Joshua Kelly more on the field last year. Then, he had a first couple good games and then goes 4 to 5 weeks on the IR with a knee injury.
Right.
So then,
right.
Then they have Isaiah Spiller, who was the youngest player in his draft. He was 20 years old last year. I think when he was drafted, 21 when the season started. Now he's, finally, a little bit older, has been in the system, I guess, for a little longer now. So I think they do want to, legitimately get Kelly and Spiller on. And Ekeler's kind of bemoaned the running back 2 production in the past, just like, I kind of can't do everything myself. I do need a guy to spell me. So that is kind of the thing. But it's just like Ekeler, as you said, is so good in terms of what he does in receiving and his shiftiness in the open field. Like, there's just not a ton of guys that can do what he does. And I think even if you want to, Spiller and Kelly might still be, particularly Spiller, more of like a dynasty league play, I would imagine. Like, in a world post Austin Ekeler, kind of what that could mean for the Chargers. But I don't know if he's going to be as fantasy relevant this year, but we'll see. I want to go to the receiver room because obviously that one is the interesting one to me, because you have Keenan, you have Mike. Both were injured last year in the regular season, missed 10 games. Plus the playoff game in Jacksonville. Mike Williams misses another game there, so that's technically 11. But if you're just looking at the regular season, 10. And then they draft Quentin Johnston, right? So in the first round, that was their big, home run swing of the draft. And I guess, how do you kind of see the target share going around? Do you see Quentin Johnston being involved super early? And what is kind of your take on all 3 of these guys? And Josh Palmer also, who had 750 yards last year, being a fantasy relevant option. What do you kind of think of all those 4 guys?
Sure. I'm not trying to get tricky, get cute here. Not for this team. Keenan Allen is the number 1 wide receiver. He's still one of the best route running wide receivers. So even though he is a bit older, when we're talking fantasy football, we're unfortunately we are ageists, and we want younger guys because that's how it works out for fantasy football. But Keenan Allen, like, his calling card isn't, I'm way faster than you. And when you're way faster than somebody, that catches up sooner than later. But if your calling card is you are just a dynamic elite route runner like Keenan Allen and you have good hands, you can stick around for a very long time. It's like you just have to be moved around in the offense a little bit. It's like Larry Fitzgerald for my Arizona Cardinals. His speed was gone for a long, long time towards the end of his career, and yet he just knows how to play football so well that he can still be a very usable wide receiver and a great fantasy football player. So it's Keenan Allen at the top. I expect another monster target share. Pretty interested I saw a quote from Keenan talking about they're finally moving me around. Like, older guys tend to be in the slot because it's just a little bit easier to succeed. Your cornerback matchup is not as difficult, but they're talking about moving him around, which I think is great. Like, get Keenan Allen on the outside for a couple shots every once in a while, then get him back in the slot. That's going to be interesting to watch. Mike Williams and Quentin Johnston, it's a little bit harder there because it's like the same archetype of player, right? It's the big, tall wide receiver. It's the guy that you're hoping you'll throw him the 50-50 ball and they'll come down with it. And Mike Williams has been pretty good at it in the past. He unfortunately gets beat up a little bit more than we really want him to. So it seems like a redundant type of a player for Quentin Johnston. Like, getting him on the field, it feels like, okay, well then you put the 2 big guys on the outside and let Keenan cook there in the middle. So he's interesting because of the draft capital, the volume you're expecting from Justin Herbert in the passing game. So I think there's margin and there's room for Quentin Johnston to have a moderate breakout of a campaign. But it would strike me more as, Mike Williams, we had the sophomore year, so about 660 yards, a touchdown outlier year. That, to me, that's how Johnston has to make his impact, because I don't see him getting a huge amount of volume. I don't see him overtaking Keenan, Ekeler, or Mike Williams. And so now if you're the number 4 target at best on most plays, that's not really fantasy football value. So you have to make up for it somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Quentin Johnston, it's going to be interesting to see how they integrate him and how fast, I guess, they integrate him too, because I think you're going to see a rush from guys like Jordan Addison and Zay Flowers, like particularly for where they were drafted, to get them in the game quickly. But the Chargers already have these 2 Pro Bowl level receiving options, so I think it'll be a little tougher. Keenan's interesting because I think people are going to kind of sell his 2022 season, certainly from a fantasy perspective, because of the games missed. But then, you look at his last 5-6 game stretch, and
he was incredible.
I think 5 of his 6 final games, he ends up having 80 plus yards. And comes up a little light on the touchdowns because of what the Chargers offense was last year, unfortunately. But I do think you saw some steps certainly in the right direction after his injury, where it's like, okay, this looks a little closer to the old Keenan Allen again, which I guess was kind of the concern last year. Give me kind of under the radar Chargers option that you might look at in terms of this offense. For me, I'm looking at Gerald Everett, because
that's where I was going to go.
Yeah. I think Gerald Everett doesn't get kind of enough love in terms of like how good of a tight end he is. He's gone up, I think, in each of the last 4 seasons. He had 555 yards last year, 50 plus receptions, which were both career highs for him. And, not that he's ever going to be in a conversation necessarily with Kelsey and, who you would put in like the top 5 tight ends. But I think as a guy that you can probably get, I don't know, in the 11th, 12th round of your draft, like that to me, I think
even later.
Screams, yeah, it's set you later potentially too. I think that screams value in terms of what you can do, especially with Justin Herbert and the opportunities that he's going to be given.
Yeah, the tight end position is notoriously difficult in fantasy football. It's Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, and then you go, I don't know where to go. So, like, if you find yourself at the very end of your football draft and you've essentially punted the tight end position, Gerald Everett is somewhat interesting to me. He fits the profile of when you're trying to take these shots at really late round tight ends. Make sure you're connected to a quarterback who has a high ADP, because if they have a high ADP, guess what? They're a good quarterback and they're going to throw a bunch of touchdowns. And then make sure that they are athletic, which Gerald Everett is. Like, he is a different type of athlete when he gets moving. There's not a lot of guys with his size speed combination. The concern would be, and you might have more info on this than I have, but I've seen just some whispers of Parham looking like he's improved. Whispers of, well, maybe he'll take the next step. So you tell me, what are you hearing about the battle of Parham versus Everett?
I think they like Parham a lot, and they've kind of been waiting for him to break out, so to speak. But he's unfortunately just been another one of those Chargers that, like we talked about, Joshua Kelly had some injuries the last couple of years. Last year was his hamstring that landed him on IR, I think, for like a month and a half. Then came back, and it was sort of tough for him, I think, to reintegrate into the offense. But it's always just felt like, he should be, with his size, the ability to use him in the red zone. They did some interesting things last year where they just made like the all tall guys like line up in the red zone, and they would have Mike Williams and Gerald Everett. Yeah, basketball offense. Mike Williams, Gerald Everett, Donald Parham, put them all in the red zone and see who comes up with the ball. And they did that in the Rams game, which I thought was really fun. But I think that is kind of the goal for Parham. I don't think that he's necessarily a guy I would feel comfortable, certainly like in a traditional league, drafting. But like, he could be a guy that maybe after the draft, like I'm looking at as just a streamer, kind of like a potentially waiver wire pickup guy after he doesn't maybe go off for a couple games or something like that. Certainly, if an injury happens to Gerald Everett, then he's certainly going to get a lot of volume. So it's kind of maybe a weird bet, but I think that just the tendency of him to not stay healthy is kind of what has prevented the full breakout season for him. But in this offense, and Kellen Moore loves just tall tight ends that go up and get the ball, like then I think that that could fuel some type of breakout campaign for him. But I do think Everett, for all intents and purposes, should be considered the guy. I wonder, kind of like we talked about with Ekeler, right? After this season, Ekeler most likely will not be a Charger, right? Considering the contract and the Chargers cap situation. The same thing's probably true of Gerald Everett, who's a free agent next year. So I wonder if there is some, momentum in the offense to try to get Parham a little bit more involved intentionally, knowing that that is kind of the future in that sense. But I think they loved using him. It's just a matter of when he's been healthy and when he hasn't been.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, that's the type of inside information we're always trying to scrounge up, and you're just you're confirming all my convictions. So that sounds good.
Yeah. I guess we could go around the league here. I know you're waiting to unveil your list of my guys this year for fantasy and all that kind of stuff, but who are some, sleepers around the league that you just sort of like in your drafts and that you've been doing in your simulations?
Sure. I don't know so much of a sleeper, but we're just speaking to rookie wide receivers, and you mentioned the name. I'm getting more and more excited and confident that Zay Jones that Zay Flowers is going to end up emerging as the number one wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens. The camp news has been incredible. The preseason one was actually exactly what I want to see, of like essentially no production at all, because like Khalil Herbert's another the running back for the Bears. He's another guy who I've loved this whole offseason. You've kind of had to make your choice of who do you think is going to be the guy for the Chicago Bears, and Khalil, I've kind of put the flag down. I'm like, no, Khalil Herbert's going to be the guy.
Yeah.
And then we got the snaps with Herbert, and then unfortunately for us who've been scooping him up late, you had the 56-yard screen to the house that gets shown a bajillion times on the networks, on ESPN in the top 10 plays, and then you're like, well, that ADP's right. That's going to rise by a couple rounds. But Flowers didn't actually do anything. He didn't register a catch, if I'm not mistaken, because I think it ended up being a backwards pass, so it was considered a rush. And it's a real small, short carry, but in that one, he made a defender look ridiculous. Like he just juked a guy right out of his cleats. He drew, I believe, 2 defensive fouls, and you're like, all right, that's like low key next level investigation, because like if defenders are already scrambling to, like, we got to get hands on this guy, we got to do something because he's just too shifty. If he's already drawing defensive penalties in a preseason game, that's pretty exciting that this player is as shifty as the Baltimore Ravens have been saying. On top of that, Rashad Bateman, who knows if he's ever going to be healthy? Who knows if he could be the guy? And then Odell Beckham on his second ACL tear, in the age where we're just, for fantasy, we're not really interested, combined with their offensive coordinator change. Zay Flowers he is rapidly rising up my draft board.
Yeah, I was interested to watch that game just because I wanted to watch Flowers and see, how does he compare against Johnston in his first preseason game, Addison, all that kind of stuff. And he drew 2 defensive penalties, like you said, and then Josh Johnson just had a touchdown wide open to him, and it just overshot it, and it went out the back of the end zone. So it's just like, you look at that production, it's like, oh, he had 1 yard, right? But I think that was
it's
perfect for fantasy. But I still think he's going to be, an awesome kind of receiver in this league, especially with the offense that the Ravens are, changing from their previous regime. So I think it'll be interesting to see kind of what his value is. I want to talk to you a little bit about Khalil Herbert, because I've always been a guy who was huge on him in the draft when he was coming out, and he ended up kind of being one of my late round hits. I went to Rutgers, so I went to bat for Isaiah Pacheco and the Chargers to take Pacheco last year. They didn't do it. I was kind of an Abanikanda guy this year, but seeing early fruits of that in the preseason. But with Herbert, they draft Rashawn Johnson. I think there was a little bit of trepidation of like, okay, does that mean that they want this to be more of like a running back by committee thing? But what are some of your expectations for him?
My expectations for him have now gone up. Not because of the catch, because that's what everyone's looking at, but you're missing the point. The point was every Justin Fields snap, at least in week 1, every Justin Fields snap was a Khalil Herbert snap. And you had, unfortunately, in preseason, you don't always get to see each facet of the NFL game where teams switch personnel. Like, if it's 3rd and 1, who's the running back on the field? Well, I would think it's going to be Herbert, but we got a 3rd and 8, and it was I'm watching going, okay, who are they going to bring it? And it was Khalil Herbert. And then it wasn't just Herbert. It was a designed screen pass to Khalil Herbert. And the end result of the play, like, if you go back and watch it, there is just an egregious illegal man downfield that didn't get called. And it was a fun play. And then especially Herbert finishing at the end, having like 2 guys draped on him, and he still makes it into the end zone. So I like the Bears to take another step up. Justin Fields getting DJ Moore, I think, it's a huge deal. Is it Stephon Diggs to Josh Allen big? That remains to be seen. But this team reinvested in Justin Fields. Like, they had the first overall pick, and they said, no, we're going to trade down. We're going to get you a true wide receiver 1, and then we're going to see what you can do. And part of seeing what you can do is certainly going to be a higher passing volume than we had last year. Does it get to like middle of the pack? Probably not. They're probably still going to be a lower pass over expectation type of a team, but that means, okay, we're going to, as long as they can move the ball and you're wanting to run the ball a good amount, Khalil Herbert looks like the guy. Any time that David Montgomery missed time, Khalil Herbert was incredible. And for me, the game that always stands out when I think about Herbert, I believe it was his rookie year, and you had Montgomery missed time, and in fantasy football, that's always like this huge bingo, free square. The green light goes on, everyone jumps to the waiver wire, except Khalil Herbert was playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the next week, and they were the number 1 rush defense in the league.
Right.
And it was, well, this is round 5, Khalil Herbert with the Bears. This is not very exciting. The dude goes for over 100 yards against the best defense on that version of the team. So I'm very excited. I think that Khalil Herbert is by far my favorite late round running back. I'm not sure where his ADP will settle for like home leagues. Home leagues, maybe they're still not paying attention and you'll get him in the double-digit rounds. But Khalil Herbert, anywhere from round 7 later, I'm willing to take him.
Yeah. You mentioned the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. I think back to this disgusting Bears-Commanders Thursday night football game I watched last year.
Sure.
And the biggest play in this game is when he rips off a 64-yard run, making moves in the open field, making people miss. And that's just what I loved about him coming out of college. So happy to hear he's going to become a more fantasy-relevant option this year.
Hope so.
Yeah, love that guy. I guess we'll finish it off here. Give me your one non-fantasy Chargers, take on where you see the team in 2023, and then you can wrap it off with your big, fantasy push.
Sure. So, my big outlook for the Chargers.
Yeah.
So, I don't think they can finish first.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
I don't think that they're finishing first either. So you have 2 people hosting a Chargers podcast that don't think they're going to finish in first place. But we hope for the best.
But I mean, hopefully, then if your people listening to you can be like, oh, I can trust this guy. It's not just all homer, all roses and puppies all the time. Like, give me a realistic look at the team, and I think the offense is going to be greatly improved. It's just it comes down to, can the defense finally be the defense that we've all been calling for? Because I feel like we're at like 3 or 4 straight years now of everyone being like, you know who the sneaky team is? It's the Chargers. The defense is going to turn it around this year. So I just don't. It's all going to come down to that. And it's a battle for second place in your division. That's just that's right. That's how things have been drawn up for the Chargers. I don't think it's not impossible or insane to see something going their way and something going wrong for like the Chiefs, you know what I mean? And then the Chargers get to sneak into first place. But as of right now, my bigger outlook would be if the defense can turn it around, then this should be a team that sneaks into the wild card.
Yeah. And any final kind of fantasy thoughts on the Chargers? I mean, other than things we talked about in the show, if there's anything we didn't mention.
Not off the top of my head. The Chargers are one of those neat and clean teams for us, where it's not like the Chiefs, where you're going, okay, Patrick Mahomes is going to throw for probably 5,000 yards, 35 plus touchdowns. Travis Kelce's great. Now what? You go, I don't know, man. MVS, Sky Moore, I don't know. And you have to like kind of have real strong convictions and projections on who's going to be the one to take the step. And last year we did that with the Chiefs. Turns out the answer was nobody. No one besides Travis Kelce. So for the Chargers, it's nice that we have the hierarchy already built in. Keenan Allen's fantastic. You have the upside pick of a first-round rookie who, look, if Mike Williams misses games like he has in the past, Quentin Johnston's going to step right up, and he will be a very highly sought-after wide receiver. I think we probably still have to wait a year, maybe two, to see the true potential for Quentin. But as a whole, the Chargers they're just real neat and easy for us.
Yeah, real neat and easy. I'm sure as Charger seasons, it won't usually play out real neat and easy, but hope for the best. Thanks to Mike for joining me. You can check him out and his live show with the other fantasy footballers guys at ballerslive.com. If you want tickets, again, that's ballerslive.com. Link will be in the description. The Palace Theater, August 26th. I'm sure it'll be a real good show.
It's going to be great.
Going to be great. I will see you guys next time. As always, bolt up.